Oh. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:31 p.m. I see that Dave Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording? Okay. We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Patrick Kiernan.
Present.
Lisa Murray. Here. Maura Ryan. Michelle Boudreau, aye, here. If you would please stand, Lisa will be leading us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you. Thank you.
And just to change gears for just a moment, last week we did lose a beloved member of our Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District community, Mark Kozauka, who served our district for 21 years as a kind-hearted, hardworking custodian at Minnetonka Regional High School, passed away after a brave battle with cancer on March 30th. In honor of Mark, we ask that you join us in a moment of silence. We are going to continue with our student representatives. We have Molly Brewer, who's a junior here at Minnetonka, and Emily Patrick, who's a senior here at Minnetonka. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
Okay.
You're good.
We're good?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, talk to see.
Perfect.
Can you guys hear?
Yeah, can you hear?
Right, a little bit closer to- oh, that one's good.
Yeah, it's like.
You know what? Can you grab it? Sorry. Thanks, Patrick. There you go. There you go. Patrick, you want to shut yours off though?
So here goes. Yes.
You're good.
Okay, so first up, student council went to their state conference, MASC. Sean Holden was elected vice president of the state, so go Sean. And Nick Supsack was awarded the region's Unsung Hero Award, which is very exciting for him. Also, we had our senior versus faculty basketball game, which was in the benefit of the sophomore and junior class. And faculty won, but I heard it was rigged, so.
MCAS was 2 weeks ago for English, and spring sports have begun. Finn performed at the Holyoke St. Patrick's Day Parade, and we are all looking forward to April break.
That's everything.
That's all we got.
That's all you got.
Just a question, what was it that Sean Holden got, his vice president of what?
Of the state student council.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't want to come and sit with us.
You're welcome. Awesome, thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks, girls.
Thank you. Moving on with the HWRSD health update.
So good evening, just really quickly, Kiara and Melissa are not here with us tonight, and just really a short update. Thank goodness, so for the HWRSD health update, this past week, we only had one positive case of COVID, which is great. We're hoping that continues to trend in that direction. So parents are doing a great job, and students are as well too. We are seeing a little uptick, our nurses are telling us, in terms of the flu. We're starting to see that taking place in not only in our school district, but the state as well too. But as of right now, our COVID update, we're at one for this past week, and that went out to still continues to go out every Wednesday as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to the Director of Finance, Operations and Human Services.
All right. So I have two items for you. The first is the monthly report. As you'll see, we do have a few more items that are in the red. We do have a number of items in the black as well. Overall, we are trending pretty well. There are some items that I've fully encumbered that we expect that will disencumber and free up a little bit of money. Our final plus numbers did come in since this report, and that disencumbered a little bit of money. So this is a period where some of those disencumbrances start to hit as we disencumber money, and money actually comes back into our budget more or less a little bit. You'll also see that we have a number of items where we have the ability to move things onto ESSER. Those are specifically areas that we wrote into our ESSER grants. For example, substitutes, right? We expect to go significantly over this year in substitutes. If we need to, we can dip into those ESSER grant funds and pay for substitutes. You'll also see that district-wide technology, for example, we ended up acquiring Chromebook management software that was fairly expensive, as well as some additional storage, both of which were covered in our ESSER grant. So we have the ability to move those over to our ESSER grant. The goal is also, we've got 2 more years on most of our ESSER grant funds. So we want to be able to be flexible with the use of those in the next few years. So, we only really want to move over, we have to move over. And then we can look again at making amendments and things like that to our ESSER grants if we need to. Any questions?
I do. What is the strategic plan, line item, that remaining balance that was there? On line item, the first one?
The very first one? Yes. So we pay Mars for their work on the strategic plan.
So why did we move that to the ESSER grant?
That's something I wrote into the ESSER grant.
Okay.
The strategic planning there is some funding to help support strategic planning and potential equity audit, right? We were having those conversations last year as I was writing the ESSER grant, and I wanted to make sure that we had the ability to support those.
And then you also have the. I'm not using that.
Just move it to your other side. Just away from the speaker.
Oh my God, sorry, guys.
Yep.
This is why.
We'll wait. Sure.
Sorry about that.
Mhm.
And then the items under the superintendent that note the transition costs, includes the 6,046 for SC work. What is that?
Yep, that is our minute taker. The people who do the work taking minutes at this meeting, as well as the other meetings that they take minutes at.
So is that above the stipend, or is that the stipend? So I know there's a stipend for that position. So is that above the stipend?
That is above the stipend.
Okay, because I know that when we initially were talking about Kate's role changing.
Yeah.
And it being separated, I don't know that it was ever brought to the school committee about what that stipend looked like and what
Yeah.
that was gonna be for us,
And
and how that worked and how we would budget that.
yeah, and honestly, by the time all of that hashed out, the budget was done. So it was really a matter of like, we're gonna have to figure this out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last question I have is, what is the HR consult item?
Yeah, so we've had through COVID helping us work with some the various COVID leaves that we've dealt with. We've had some support from an HR consultant who is sort of an expert in that area. Yeah, Mark Brophy.
Okay.
Everybody's, other than that, we're good. Okay. You have another memo from me. I will summarize it. But last meeting, the committee approved a $300,000 assessment to the towns for network switches. Since that time, we've received some messages from the towns that they seem surprised at that assessment, that was coming. I think maybe there was some communication. We felt like we had shared that at multiple budget and finance subcommittee meetings. We shared the round tables. We shared the assessment amounts. But really the goal isn't to split hairs, it's to work with our member towns. Al set up some meetings with towns. We've had some pretty productive conversations. At this point, we are past the 45-day window to say, vote it off of the town meeting, right? We were up against sort of that time frame for the 45-day window. But since that time, both towns have expressed an interest in working out those network switches, the cost. Both towns have some ARPA funds, and maybe there are some other opportunities. So I think the goal at this point would be to look at where those opportunities progress to. You know, if we get to a point where the school committee feels comfortable, the committee could agree to ask to have that taken off at school meeting, at town meeting if necessary. You know, and depending on what happened, if you'll see at the end, I do express that there is some ability to sort of limp along for another year if we had to. The big piece of the equation, if you see in that last paragraph, the one catastrophic item would be our core switch. So if, you know, if there were no other source of funding, we could lose some other switches in this building. We could work around them and replace them if we needed to. If that core switch went, internet for the entire district would go away. So, you know, we would be looking to at least replace that core switch this year if we could. It is, you know, at or very close to end of life, end of support, things like that. So I'm not offering any request for a vote at this time, because again, we're beyond that 45-day window to be able to change anything, I believe, at this point. So I think we're gonna work with the towns as best we can. We'll see if we can come up with any sort of solution. You know, recognizing we have a number of throttle points. We've pushed the fire hose into our school district through fiber. But inside of the buildings, there are throttle points. Our network switches were not designed for fiber. We can't make the most use of that fiber with our current network switches. Even some of our wireless access points and things like that create some throttle points, right? And we're looking at how do we, now that we have that coming in, how do we sort of release some of those throttle points and open them up? And this would be one of those.
My only question to you, and I'm not belaboring this
Sure.
point, but the communication miss or the communication gap, have we identified what that gap was so we know not to have this gap again? Or
So at the very least, I think the select board of the town of Wilbraham, I can definitely say would like to be notified directly by us, as opposed to say going through the FinCom. That was one of the messages we got loud and clear. I'm not exactly sure what the best solution for Hamden is, but I think we would, I think there's some confusion about. I think at the end of the day, when we get down to the 11th wire with approving the budget in a 45-day window, my sort of backstop was going to the regional agreement, right? That's the agreement between the towns as to how we do business. I guess there was some question about, why we went to the regional agreement. But again, to me, that's sort of what defines how we do business. So I think we would like to continue those conversations and make sure that everything we put forward goes to everyone possible, right? Again, I think we felt like we had gone to the capital planning committee of Wilbraham and shared it there. It was shared through the capital plan we provided, things like that. But again, I think the select board expressed that they would like to be directly notified, and I think next time, if this is going to happen, we would do that. This will not be the last capital item that Minnetonka ever needs. So, I believe in talking to people also, there's probably been about a 20-year gap in any capital needs for Minnetonka being expressed. So, the old building was at end of life. People were talking about replacing it for a number of years before it was replaced. So there probably weren't capital requests going to the towns. And since the new Minnetonka building, this is the first to come up. So there's really no history to tell us what happened, how did this work? So I think we probably need to work together before next year happens, and we have other capital items that come up on the agenda, and we work through how those are expressed.
yeah, I would say, Bill, maybe we should have them invite capital planning for a meeting or two to the budget subcommittee.
Well, I'll just speak loudly. Yeah, I mean, I think there's many options that are on the table. I mean, the first thing that I want to say as forthright as I can is I don't think that there was any attempt on the part of the school committee, the finance and operations subcommittee, the finance and operations director to obfuscate anything that was related to the purchasing of these switches. These switches were noted on the capital list of both roundtables. There were discussions held at both roundtables regarding the use of ARPA funds specifically, which is why it was listed as a separate item on the warrant. So, you know, I was a little taken aback when it was relayed to me that there were members of the select boards or the finance committees who felt that this was sprung upon them. I would say that unless I went to the Hallmark card store and found a card specifically for how you request disbursements from federal funds, I mean, it just seems a little crazy. I mean, we did everything that we could to get this out to people. And the bottom line is that, you know, some people felt as though it wasn't as clearly expressed. I think that if we have another budget roundtable, probably the best thing to do is for the select boards from both towns, finance from Wilbraham, and advisory from Hamden. Please give us what you want and how you want that information relayed to you. Because I really didn't care for how this whole thing happened and how it looked like it looked very political, and it didn't look like it had students' education in their best interests. We should all be working together to make sure that this school district is the best school district that it possibly can be. Posturing does not help.
So the only question I have is if the switch goes and we have excess money in E&D, can that be used for that? Because we had
Yes.
excess money last year
Sure.
that could have been used to repair the switch or at least help with some of that expense and that burden.
We can have conversations. I would absolutely, we get to the end of the year, as we get towards summer, if it doesn't seem like this is something that's going to happen in any other way, I would implore you to allow us to look at that as a vehicle,
So the idea,
at least to replace the course.
yeah. So the idea of taking it out of ARPA funds is it's the least direct way in which it's picking the pockets of the taxpayers, right? So with its ARPA funds, it's still coming out of our pockets, but it's sort of the collective pocket of the United States. Whereas if it comes out of either the Minnetonka Stabilization Fund or if it comes out of END, it's still coming out of assessments, whether we like it or not. So the idea behind it was that if we had this federal grant money that we could use for these switches, which, I mean, seems like a pretty reasonable thing to me, seeing as how I think did you explain the bottleneck effect and why these are so important?
Yeah, so it's, it's a throttle point.
Yeah, so if, I mean, if this is gonna make education and connectivity and communication so much better within the high school, I can't imagine why we would wanna kick this can down the road. I think it's too important.
I just personally didn't expect it to be listed on the assessment letter. I could understand why there might have been confusion about that. And I say that because even the meeting we had, the last meeting, the question to Aaron was, he hadn't heard from Nick from capital planning. But there was a conversation that we knew had happened. So we didn't get confirmation from the town of Wilbraham on the ARPA. And in order for that to be paid by both towns, you have to have agreements from both. That's kind of how the assessment works as far as what percentage. I personally didn't expect it to be on the assessment letter.
Well, it would have to be, right? Because it would have to be a separate article on the warrant because it's not part of the school
Okay.
budget, right? So when you ask for the money for the school budget, you're asking for an allotted amount based on the budget. Because the funding for this is coming from a source other than assessments and other than Chapter 70, Chapter 71 aid, it has to be listed separately and would have to be listed separately as an article on the warrant for the town meeting. Because the funding source is different. Now, if the towns have the option of saying, you know, yes, we're going to fund this, this could still stay on the warrant, okay? And there's several things that could happen. The towns could choose to fund it. They could choose to say, you know what, we're gonna pay for this. Or the towns could shoot it down, or the selectmen could step in and say, we're gonna take care of this with the federal money that we have through ARPA. Or the school committee may decide as a whole, well, you know what, we're just gonna scrap it and
Take no
we'll
action.
take no action on the question. So there's a lot of different ways we can go. I would wait until we get further out to see where the select boards are gonna end up on this. Because at the end of the day, I think it's a really smart use for that money. And it certainly is something that would qualify under the ARPA statutes.
Needless to say, if I can just say, we will work with the towns in terms of how they'd like to see that. I mean, the regional looming clearly provides this as an avenue. If there's a different way they'd like to see it, whether it's, you know, on the assessment or through the method that Dr. Heavy suggested, that's fine with us. You know, I'm agnostic to that.
Actually, one quick question on this. So do the system that we have, that core switch that we have, are there redundancies built into it or not? If that, so you're saying if that switch goes, we're down? There's no
Pretty much,
backup?
yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I can talk to Bill again, but that was what he expressed to me.
I mean, I understand that it can't take the bandwidth from the fiber, so it's throttling us down. But not to have a redundancy in there seems a little.
I can talk to Bill again, but I mean, if it goes down, we're gonna have to replace it regardless. So it'd be, you know, I mean, I'd be remiss in saying.
In conversations with Bill, I'm assuming he's told you that the ideal time in which to do all of this work is when school's not in
Yeah,
session.
of course.
It would certainly make a big, it would certainly make a big
That's why we
difference.
would want to do it the minute, you know, the minute we knew something wasn't gonna happen. We'd
Yeah.
say, let's just get the core switch done. You know, the rest of the switches may be, you know, somewhat throttle points. We may not have as much speed as we'd like or throughput as we'd like.
I think one of the things shut.
I'm just curious.
Kitty's there. You're just yourself talking.
What's stopped us from getting it under the wire for 45 days?
So the 25th was the last day we could submit our assessments to the town. We voted the budget on the 24th. So we originally ran, you know, to go through on the 17th. At that time, the towns were discussing using ARPA funds. So you notice it wasn't on my projections for the 17th. On the 22nd, I received word that the towns were not necessarily going to put that on ARPA. So there were conversations, I believe, between the towns. I had initially been asked to reach out to Nick Brayo and suggest whether ARPA, that was as far back as I think March 7th. So I believe they were working on the potential of using ARPA for that. And so when I received word on the 22nd that it had sort of fallen apart, that's when we needed a vehicle for it. And in order to make the town warrant, if we were going to want to, it made sense to at least put it, you know, on the table as an option. It can always, like we said, it can always be voted down. We can always agree together to take it off at town meeting if another source is discovered.
And had we were not received, at both roundtables, there was a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there was enough discussion generated. I think everybody who was at those meetings understands that we had talked about using ARPA funds and that both towns seemed amenable to do that. Now, either I'm losing my sanity or that really did happen.
I thought it was only at the second meeting that came up.
Well,
Because
either,
one meeting we talked about the potential of using because Green Meadows was gonna be paid off that bond.
but that conversation, but it did happen at the second meeting for sure.
There was a conversation about it for sure.
Right. So that was, so when we talk about doing the budget, I mean, if we didn't have any idea that there was the potential to use ARPA funds, well, then you would just wrap that 300,000 into the school budget, raise the budget by 300,000 and say that in that budget is the number for the switches. The only reason why it was separated out is because there had been some robust discussion and some agreement among people that were at the roundtable that it was a legitimate use for ARPA funds.
But if he knew, then that should have been communicated to us.
So can I just say one thing? So I don't think that Aaron mentioned it, and I had a meeting that I scheduled with some select board from both Wilbraham and from prepared to use and put out that ARPA money just yet. Wilbraham, from what we've heard from one of the select board members, is they're getting a person together that's gonna help decide how they're gonna use that ARPA money. Same thing in Hampton, they haven't had really robust conversation yet, how they're gonna use that ARPA money. So the thing that came out really loud and clear is we're ahead of that line of people that saying, we need to use this money, and we'd like to take and use this ARPA money. So if anything good came out of it, both communities now know that this is a source and we need this, and this is a great way to spend your ARPA money as well too. But I think we just move quicker than some of the people in the community were ready to use and expend that money. And they pretty were clear with us with that, but all of them, both towns have said to us that we believe that this is a good way to use the ARPA money, and this is, and they've given us a strong commitment to that.
Bill, did we invite capital planning from both towns to the roundtable?
We did not, but I talked about that the last time.
Nick was at the first roundtable meeting. He was at
No,
one.
we didn't invite, but they weren't on the official invite. We didn't have them as part of it. It was just finance and operations. Although it would certainly be, a reasonable thing to do. I just, you always, you battle the line, you start getting, you get 20, 22 people there and you're trying to balance a discussion among 22 people. It's hard enough. Add another 10, and at what point does it become chaos?
And the other thing we heard from when we met with the select board member, not all of them, that not only do we have the advisory and FinCom, but they would like that direct communication as well too, instead of just going through those two, but also relaying that information directly to them as well too. So in the future, that's something we'll be working on as well.
So will anything happen about this at town meeting?
It should be on the town meeting warrant, and, assuming that things go as we've discussed with the towns, there would be some sort of action, I don't know the exact action, to remove it from the warrant at town meeting at that time.
Yeah, because wouldn't you have to take money from Peter to pay Paul?
Yeah.
At town meeting, and nobody likes
Sure.
that.
Well, technically, this money, they just have to figure out how we can shake the tree, for lack of a better term.
And, to me, the real lesson is let's figure out how to do this for sure next time, right? So, we don't have, there doesn't seem to be history with it. There is a vehicle through the regional agreement. So how do we do this? And how do we sort of express that need for capital funds?
Makes sense.
Can I share one more item that's, if we're done?
Yeah.
One more item. I just want to let you know, the audit is complete. It appears there are no findings or substantial, recommendations or comments from the auditor on either the full audit or the audit of our end of year report that goes to Desi. And I think for the first time ever, I've received no adjustments on my end of year audit. So, it's tediously compiling a whole lot of items that you data enter into a spreadsheet. And there's a lot of places to have fat fingers as you do that. So it's nice to not have to go and do an amendment to my end of year report. That probably won't ever happen again, but it's nice not to have that. The auditor will probably give us, I think, like last year, a management letter that just says, hey, here are some things you could be doing better. I'm guessing the PO item will be on it again, the encumbrance item, and my response will be very similar. And we'll go from there. But as soon as that comes in, I will have copies for everyone, and I'll have a memo to accompany. So
Thank you.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you.
awesome.
Nice job.
Okay, we will move on to public comment. It looks like nobody has signed up. Is there anyone that was interested in making a comment that was not able to sign up?
Just so you know, ARPA funds.
Oh, so
Sorry.
So we will call on those who have signed up for public comment. We do ask that when called, each person state their name and address, sit at the designated location, and speak up for up to 2 minutes. If you have any documents that you would like to share with the committee, please hand them to Aaron Dowding. Before you begin, Sean Kennedy will be monitoring time. You will have 2 minutes. So just make sure you state your name and your address. Thank you.
Sure. I'm Mark Ducey at 22 Pleasantry Road. Just so we're clear, ARPA funds are not part of the budget. So we're not, and if you put it on a town warrant, that has to come from the budget money somehow. That's not funded. We never were aware that was going to be requested.
If we didn't include it as part of the school budget. We
You
included it as
did,
part of.
you did when you put it on the assessment letter. for new roofs or for whatever, new doors. It's the same process. You could have went to them, and my understanding, I'm not a capital member, but there's liaisons on the finance committee. My understanding is it was never told to them that was a priority. They could have made that the top priority.
Okay, so this is listed under superintendent openings. I'm a little confused here. So it basically lists that we're advertising for a position. Have we gotten any applications, by the way?
They go directly to NESIC, so a community outreach and forums, and then we'll be meeting with the school committee, and then we will create a profile for the position. So discussing what.
So we've advertised the position, but we don't even have a profile created. Do
No.
we even have a subcommittee of the school committee to do the superintendent search?
Yep, so we will be doing that on the 14th. And so we are hiring a superintendent, we know that. So that is the opportunity that is being presented to the public.
Correct. The question is how can you advertise a position if you haven't even decided on what the qualifications are? When you hire somebody, when you
Yes.
advertise for a job,
Mhm.
you create a job description and a profile, and then you advertise for that. Meaning, we have a superintendent. How many years of in-office, like in district experience?
Yep.
Do you want somebody that has a PhD? Do you want somebody who has been a superintendent? Do you have a minimum number of years?
Mhm.
How is it that we're advertising a position and we haven't even as a committee decided what it is that we're looking for?
So we will go over all these questions on April 14th, and all that has gone out is that we are in fact hiring a superintendent. We do not have all of the details
But you can submit an application right now for that position, and we haven't advertised. All I'm saying is that this is the company, okay, that we've hired.
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't trust them selling soup right now because we're advertising nothing We're inviting applications. When are we gonna get the public involved in this? I mean, aren't we supposed to have members of the community be involved in this? We're
Yes.
supposed to have a superintendent search. Yet we've already invited applications.
Yes.
So my question is, who's running this?
Yeah.
Who's running this? I mean, honestly, like, it seems like NESDEC is just kind of doing what they want. Who wrote this? Who wrote this letter and put this out there? Did any member of the school committee have any input on this? Is this a form letter that
It
came out?
was sent, I don't remember the date, but it was sent to all community members for input. And when we did go over that general timeline,
I will tell you this, I think, and I hope that the committee takes me seriously when I say this. In your rush, and I say this in all sincerity, stop focusing on politics.
there's no
Focus,
politics, Bill.
please let me finish.
Bill,
Please let me finish.
these are questions that will be answered. You can
Please,
talk
please
to
let
the
me,
expert at NESDEC.
please let
They
me,
will be here April
Please let me.
14th at 6 o'clock. You can ask all of your questions. She would be the perfect person to answer these questions.
please
The
let
way
me.
that we have it, the committee agreed that this is how the method in which we are taking.
Wait.
And we are advertising for a superintendent. We have not gone over qualifications and the details and the skill set or all of the other, things that we want the superintendent to have.
So
But
let
we
me just
do
add,
know that we are hiring for a
so, all
superintendent.
right, so rather than express it
But
this way,
I'm not the one to answer these questions. And again,
I'm
she will
gonna
be here
ask a
April
question of every single member of this committee. Does every single member of this committee feel that this is the best way that we can go about hiring the most important person in our district? Because if anybody in this group can answer me yes, then I'm gonna question, why would you say that? I mean, there is literally, like, I don't understand. All of the stuff just on a boilerplate recipe, but without any input from the district. And I understand, we're going to be meeting with NESDEC next week. We should have met with NESDEC 3 weeks ago. The first thing we did when we hired MASC to do the superintendent search for our current superintendent is that we sat down with MASC and they asked us, what do you want your next superintendent to be?
That is
And
not
that's
who we
why.
chose.
Please be mindful of the tone.
Yeah.
Out of
So
respect. please be
that
mindful
was-
of the tone.
That was the first thing that we were at. Every single thing that I have seen has been generated through NESDEC and nothing has been generated through us. I'm embarrassed for us. I'm embarrassed for us as a committee because what our number one job is to make sure that we hire the best person that we can to support education. And I warn you, this is how good districts fail. This is how great districts fall apart, is because from a leadership we only have 3 jobs, and this is one of them. Hire the superintendent. We have not done our due diligence. And to say, well, this is what we were told to do. No, The only thing that we said at the last meeting was that we were going to hire NASDAQ. None of this information has passed through this committee's hands. None of the information that is posted on their website has passed through any of our hands. So I'm not scolding you, I'm scolding everybody on this committee. Shame on us for rushing through this without giving this really the gravity that it deserves. And I hope that as we move forward on this, we have a much more mature mode of thinking about our rationale for how we're going to fill this position. Because rushing through and letting NASDAQ make all the calls is simply not what I would consider to be smart, and certainly not fulfilling of our responsibilities as school committee members.
Dave, that email was sent to the committee. I will, thank you.
Just a quick in here. So it says the only thing, text approved by March 21st, 2022. NASDAQ develops a letter and adds school committee liaison, final approval, NASDAQ website announcement posted as soon as the information is available. And when I asked about this, what is the school committee, what's the liaison, and I volunteered, you said we don't need that yet, and that you were handling it. So I don't think that we're steering in the dark here. I think Michelle has this under control, right? Or not?
Yes, so at that meeting, the date of the meeting, I don't know if it was the
Says
budget,
the 21st.
but we had a meeting where this was presented. This document along with that copy. And actually Patrick made a comment about how Wilbraham was mentioned before the town of Hampton. We gave a little blurb about each of the towns. And we switched it, added the enrollment, things that we were proud of. That went to each and every school committee member. And I did say at that meeting that we would discuss, like, if anyone has any feedback about what brings us pride, what are we proud of, things like that, that was brought up. You had the opportunity, you had several days to respond.
But didn't you just tell me that was, because you were surprised when you said what was the letter of intent?
So maybe, Bill, I did misspeak. It was not the letter of intent, but it was the verbiage that's on that form, but we did discuss it publicly. I did bring it to the committee. It was emailed prior to the meeting. Everybody had the opportunity to read it at the meeting, before the meeting, and after the meeting.
Was it, so are you telling me that, am I the only person that was under the assumption that we
Like, there's a superintendent position open, if we're hoping to hire. Retired, letting people know that the opportunity will be coming and that it will be available.
From my
Let's keep
perspective,
our
I mean,
eyes
does
out.
that make sense though? I mean, I don't understand. It's like saying, I'm gonna scratch my head like this, you
I
know?
think I know what the disconnect is
So-
here, if I may, just for a quick one.
So
Wait, Bill, I think I get the disconnect, right? So normally what I would do is when I want to hire somebody is I sit down and I write up the profile, write up the job description. So it's very detailed. You put it out so that people who are qualified within
Absolutely,
the criteria that I put down there would apply for the job.
yes.
I think what's happening is that we, through NASDAQ, through this process, they are telling people that we are looking for a superintendent. We will develop the criteria. So we're going to get a lot of applications in, and then we're going to go through all those applications and pick out the ones that fit our criteria. It's not how I would do it, but it's how NASDAQ does it. And that's what I understood. Is that correct, Michelle? So I understand what you're saying. You're saying, like, we're just saying, just send us superintendents. And I guess that's what they're doing. And then hopefully when we get those applications, we will find some that meet our criteria. It's a different way. Like you and I wanted MASC, we know how they work. And this is different, but we're all on board.
But just
You know what I
because it's
mean?
not MASC.
I know, we're all on board.
I'm not making a distinction between NASDAQ and MASC, other than to say that, I'm very I haven't seen anything so far in this process that has indicated a great deal of input from this committee or from members of the community. And that's all I'm going to say. Okay, I've warned about this before.
Absolutely.
if we want to do something, you do it well, don't do it fast.
So Michelle, next week, next Thursday, 6 to 8, it's a school committee meeting, but it's also open to the entire public to come
It's
in
a
and get.
posted meeting. All of them there will be posted open meetings. the landscape plan of the
Wonder if
town.
someone just-
Patrick,
Look
are you
at our
reading that right
district.
now off
But-
the website? 'Cause I can't.
Yes.
But
The
anyway,
internet's
so I'll
going a
follow up
little
to see
slow.
where it all out, Bill, and you can give them some pointers on what, how to do this a little bit better.
The paper.
And it's, sorry, it's one other thing and it's really.
That's fine.
small.
Yep.
They bold very few things. them to truly embrace when you call those two things equal. It is critical to have the cultural competency. I just think this is a slippery slope and a road where we potentially see a weakened or diminished foreign language offering, which we're already seeing from our budgetary decision. I would encourage all of us to pay attention to the next one that says due to budgetary cuts. So right now, if I'm not mistaken, we offer 2 languages and that's it. It's not French and Spanish. I think that's probably the 2 languages that were offered back in, what they have it when you were in high school.
French, Spanish,
That
Latin.
was before they had shoes.
Yeah. I took 4 years of Spanish, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure the other
But
way.
my guess is it was
Yeah.
French and Spanish, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this looks kind of like a solid 1985 offering. And I'd like to think that as we truly look at our mission, which is to contribute to a global society, that our foreign language offering would more represent a truly global society. Culture important, but let's make sure that it doesn't water down having people that are proficient in language when they
Even
walk
our-
out of these classes.
Actually, Patrick, I think what they're trying to do is the same thing that we were talking about. You know, when I go in and I'm looking on, you know, creating a computer game, that I go in afterward, you know, that it interests me into the magic behind it. And I think that the cultural is putting an accent on the cultural so that you want to speak the language, you want to go there. I
As
think that's
much-
what they're going, but
As much importance. So if you are truly learning a foreign language, the teacher is bringing the culture into it. You can't learn a foreign language without the culture. But to call it as important, a framework for teaching that places as much importance, I think that's language that we need to be very careful on, and it could diminish the offering that we will see in years to come based off that shift. I guess
Being able to identify the Eiffel Tower versus being able to describe it are 2 very different things. And if you're going to take a foreign language, linguistic competency is, I think, really what you're looking for. You want to be able to speak it. Now you want to be able to identify, you know, cultural icons from within that language group.
Well, I think you're right. I think this was the purpose of the shift was to get children excited about really speaking the language.
I think that's what they,
Yeah.
I can
they're hoping.
I can give a little bit of context. First of all, I'd encourage you to come in and watch a proficiency lesson. The 1985, which I was 89, by the way, so I'm a little offended.
I wouldn't say you were.
The 1985 offerings.
Sorry.
When you teach foreign language, this approach transitions to, hey, we're in Colombia, and we're going into a cafe. What Spanish do we need to know to order a Danish and a coffee? So we need to know some coffee terms, how we might want our coffee, and maybe some Danish terms. And then what are the verbs we need to know? And let's learn that. Boom. All right, let's apply it. Let's practice it. Maybe let's go to Dunkin' Donuts and try it. You know, instead of here are 35 verbs that you need to know. You need to transcribe them or conjugate them, excuse me, conjugate them in present tense, past tense, present past particle tense. And memorizing all those things where you learn the grammar very well, but you can't speak it. The other thing that's happening with this change in philosophy is we are testing this year about 60 students to graduate with the bilingual certification. And so they are speaking more. And that's going to be much better. The other day I was walking by Becky Lewis's classroom. The kids were in class, were doing something. She had her desk in the hallway, and one by one, the kids were coming out and they were having a conversation in Spanish about a specific topic. And she was assessing them. So we want kids, we want to graduate kids that are bilingual, is what we're trying to move towards. And that doesn't mean the older way of teaching it, they weren't bilingual, but they were doing a lot more conjugation than they were speaking. They might get on a subway and be able to, and this is what I remember as a student, so this is just my experience, not a universal experience. But I could go on the subway in Boston and I could read the signs. And I took 4 years, I could read the signs. If somebody next to me asked me, tried to have a conversation, I was not very confident in that. But I could read it and write it very well.
So my comment on the 80s had more to do with we offer French and
Yeah.
Spanish as opposed to
Mandarin.
Yeah.
all the different languages that we see out in the world
Love
that
to
have
do it.
become more prevalent.
I think part of that, though, also has to do with, and Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, it just has to do with the number of students. I mean, not Cathedral, at Central, they offer Italian.
Mhm.
Because they have a large enough population of students to support an Italian curriculum. With a high school, with a high school of less than 1,000 kids, it's a little bit hard to be able to, and I know what you're saying, Patrick. Even in Greenfield, when I was there in high school, we had, French, Spanish, and German. So to see that we only have 2 languages, is a little surprising. And then, as far as the way you learn language, I think it's an interesting concept. I would, say that just if you learn the language a certain way, you probably just want to avoid certain social situations in which you haven't been exposed to those verbs. So avoid the coffee shops if you
Actually,
haven't.
Bill,
Have you had
I'm
a
Learn
actually
Italian, go to
case in
Starbucks.
point on this, because I took 4 years of Spanish, and though I can understand some Spanish and read some, I really can't speak it. But I took 1 Russian language class. My wife's from Ukraine, she speaks Russian, and her mother doesn't speak any English, and I communicate with her. So it's being in that culture.
Well, it's not so much the culture, it's immersion.
That's
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
If you all, sorry, I got you.
Which is huge. And for someone who travels fairly extensively throughout Latin America, I would tell you the way that we learned from a textbook standpoint, as I say, I can textbook Spanish all day long. Conversationally, the way it flows, it makes sense. My concern is just culturally that we don't put an overemphasis on the cultural element and it becomes, and I think of one of our offerings at the middle school where there isn't a foreign language teacher. I don't want it to become a scenario where we meet a standard that DESE created, and by offering world languages or I forget what we offer for sixth through 8th grade at Green Meadows, but it's not a foreign language. And I don't want to get to a point where the high school
And
doesn't
that's
have
what
it.
they'll struggle with against the high
Maybe it's
school.
poorly worded.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say.
Because I think the cultural experience dictates the language that you learn.
So we could talk about that, maybe making some adjustments. That the one thing I do gotta tell you, Patrick, when you're talking about besides the French and the Spanish, like Mandarin, like that's a huge language.
Yeah.
Never have I seen it in all my years starting to be taught at the high school level, right? That started at the elementary levels where they really do, in the middle school level where they really.
Well, so you want to get me going on the fact that we don't start a full year of.
Earlier on,
Ridiculous.
So I was-
Street starts at a preschool level with
So when you're
no
talking about some of
strays.
those foreign languages, the
Saying.
Mandarin, stuff like that, those pathways that are created at the kindergarten level and the first grade levels, you can learn any language
Yeah.
after that, right? So.
We had Mandarin at Mitchell.
We
We had 2
did.
years of Mandarin and it was the result of budget cuts.
And how is the,
We had 2 years of Mandarin. A local kid, Katie.
I think it was my first year, yeah.
Yes,
I think it was my first year.
So
Yeah,
I had her
year.
at St.
Yeah,
John.
we were just
I
interested-
love them.
We were just interested in what happened to the course.
Oh, sorry. It got cut.
It got cut because
Budget.
And also the part about it gets cut because lack of student interest. And that's the conversations that.
No,
we have.
no.
Yeah, wait, hold on, wait a minute. So
Which
if
is
you
different.
feed them when they're younger and they get excited about that language, then that progresses up from the elementary school to the middle school. And so when the kids are in high school, they want to continue it. Because then, let's be very honest, no one after 4 years of Spanish, French, or even Mandarin is going to be able to be completely bilingual. That's a really tough thing to really have. Even when you go off to, look at all of us here, no offense, myself included, right? I had 6 years, we had 2 in middle school, 4 in high school, I'm still struggling. And so I just think that the more we start at a younger age, even more productive for our kids. But
Okay,
again, sorry, guys.
I'm gonna interrupt. I was given 15 minutes.
Yeah.
because- and,
It's good conversation. It's good conversation.
I actually practiced this all day, and I was down to 11 minutes and
You're way over, you're way over.
I think I only have a few minutes left to get to my 11 minutes, so we're gonna go. And this is not to encourage more of the same, but all Latin courses are inactivated. I'm just gonna leave it at that because we dug this ground. Math, no changes. History and social science, AP government credits will now apply to the civics graduation requirement. Just kind of truncate this a little. Civics graduation was a performance-based requirement where you had a project for civics, and it was hard for which ones? AP government found it difficult to schedule both AP government and civics. Also, the restriction for the way the project had to be done. This restriction also limited students pursuing AP capstone requirements. So they modified the AP government curriculum to include the 6-step civics project so that civics and American identity can be offered within that, and so can American government.
Yeah, please, that show.
It's a,
Just, I'm sorry.
Just let me do this because I have other things on my.
American government.
Go ahead. No, I just had a question about phys ed. In the freshman and sophomore years, physical education, that's a requirement from DESE, it's a requirement all 4 years. I know my daughter was asking, just because she was, the phys ed programs are the courses are kind of, the blocks are kind of long, they're like 90 minutes. But I'll talk to you offline about it.
Okay, basically, junior phys ed, health and wellness, and is inactivated, and so is senior phys ed, health and wellness. And this is to activate a combined class of phys ed, health and wellness for juniors and seniors. The students in their junior and senior years have the option of taking general physical phys ed class or phys ed electives. 2 of them are Fit for Life or yoga to meet the annual physical ed requirement. By combining the juniors and seniors in general phys ed class, rather than separating them by their year, creates greater flexibility for scheduling students when selecting classes. Question? Peggy? Just so you know, there were also special offerings. Research, EP Freshman Foundation, and CTEP Collaborative for 10th through 12th grade.
Thank you, Cheryl, on that. Does anyone have any?
So before I'm afraid to turn my thing on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Turn it on,
Just
sorry.
project. So
Patrick already had it on.
the only question I kind of have is, as one of the other things that we got in our folder was the draft for the, for the full program studies. And my question is, within the first few pages, when it talks about what the high school graduation requirements are versus the Mass State University requirements.
Yeah.
We match 4, we're 3 versus 4 for Massachusetts universities. Science is, sorry, I gotta make this a little bigger, is 3, which we match at the university level. The world language for our graduation requirement is 0 to the Mass University requirement, which says 2 minimum, 3 to 4 for highly competitive programs. So my concern is, why would we want to be less than what the university level is and not at least match that? And granted, I realize that students are going to schedule with their guidance counselors. But I could see where people may get that understanding.
So I think when you're looking at graduation requirements, you have to keep in mind that every graduate is not going to college.
Yep.
So you have to have the different pathways. If we match the minimum requirements to a state university, some students who struggle in school
Somehow it's
Due
muted.
to
Okay.
budgetary
Should be up.
reasons, and in your opinion, is a loss for student achievement.
Reduction due to budgetary reductions.
So I'm focused on the,
Seems to be
if
on.
we could see that
Good.
at a future meeting, I'd like to understand from a budgetary reduction standpoint only, what is impacting student achievement that's been removed.
And I think the things that have increased, because I don't think it's all about reduction. The things that have increased are the result of the student needs that we're seeing as they enter the building. We have more counselors now because kids are, they've been through trauma these last 2.5 years. Our teachers have been through trauma. It has really been a tough pandemic for both educators and students to go through, and families. So yeah, I'd happily sit down and show you what those changes have been. But to be fair, I will say that some of it is the result of student enrollment decline at a district level. Some are the results of budgetary reductions, and some are the results of moving up in support staff to effectively help students.
And one of the things, Steve, that you just said that was really important is that shift that's taken place. I know one of the things we hear from you, Patrick, is student-facing positions. And that doesn't necessarily mean that educators that's sitting in front of a classroom teaching Latin or teaching, Mandarin or whatever it is. It's that social emotional piece that we've increased tremendously, that we needed to have, because that's what we get when we're sitting.
Here,
Assume
but
from those,
it's just shutting off.
you say no to that. Can I assume that,
Yeah.
can we assume from this being on the agenda item that the vote was naturally going to take place?
I'm going to say to what you just said, I mean, there are items on the agenda that we vote on all the time. We don't have it listed as vote required.
Okay.
And if we have a quorum of the full membership here and the membership agrees that a motion can be made and voted on, I don't see.
Okay, good.
And I also think that I have my contemporary notes that I put down, finally, make a motion and take the vote.
Okay.
So we can submit this in.
Got it, Captain.
I'm gonna be a pain again. So this goes
a bunch of different documents, what I'd love to do is link to it. That way, when we update the AUP, we don't have to update 10 different documents, so that's usually my goal.
Right, but there were forms that we voted
Sure,
on,
yeah.
that go into that should be part of the handbook that are at different grade
Yes.
levels. That's the part that never
Yes.
made it this year, that should have made it.
Right, so
Like
my
I voted
belief
on
was
and
that
approved
those
last
were
year.
linked in the piece around Chrome, the Chromebook one.
They weren't linked so that when you
Okay,
go online
we'll
and look
take
at
a
the student handbook,
We'll
that they're
take a
there.
look. Okay,
Just wanna make sure.
Just being mindful of the time, I know that later on in the agenda, we have Sean Sweeney.
We're okay.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so
So Bill, we're on to you.
Okay, so I have a couple different items. It's gonna take me about 20 minutes to go through.
I was like, we haven't even had a meeting.
So we're on to policy subcommittee.
Second
Sorry,
reading.
I had a question on LPVC. Any progress on renting space?
yes, we're meeting with them tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
And just, if I could just add one more thing to Patrick, your comment about that. So we met with Camden on Monday, Tuesday, and gave them some input regarding that, the use of space of TWB. So they were in favor of us pursuing further, getting more information. We put a pause on that. So we had a chance to talk to Dawn and Bob about that as well too. So they're in favor of that. So that's where we're at.
They
And
just
please
wanna
note that
know.
it's on the future agenda items. for
Yes,
next time.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Policy subcommittee, this is the second reading. Please note the memo. The next school committee meeting, we'll do the final reading and we'll vote to accept it if you agree. If you don't agree and have any questions, please bring those to the next meeting or speak now or for hold your peace, I guess.
So is the next meeting as in a week from today or the next meeting?
No, the next school committee meeting,
School committee.
when it's posted
Not
on the
next week.
agenda.
The next week we're dedicating to,
Right, okay.
unless you want to stay after.
I-
We absolutely talk policy. I like policy.
If you need help, I'll be there.
So one consent agenda.
Yeah, I did have on the consent agenda, when I read over, it, did anyone else catch that on one of the votes? It has, I believe it has Lisa Murray is voting in the affirmative and the negative.
Correct, yes,
Has that been changed?
for the mass. It was Patrick and Maura.
Did we make that change in this most recent one?
Page 3, number 7, the free mask mandate for HWRSD vote. Ms. Murray, I believe you did second it.
No, it was,
Mrs.
oh, for you, yes.
Yeah. But then she did vote, it wasn't, she did not vote in the negatives.
No, I opposed.
Yeah.
I'll change that. Sorry.
So that I don't get into Olinda's bad graces, can everybody? Thank you.
Thank you.
far as digital signatures are concerned, identify me individually on the letter.
I don't necessarily say that I don't agree with the 3 letters that you sent out to legislator bodies. The part that I didn't agree with was that I didn't authorize my signature to be used in the manner in which it was used. Because I've never had a digital signature. So the letter itself had you listed as the chair of the subcommittee and Michelle as the chair of the school committee, and then it listed all of the school committee members. And if I recall correctly, any other document we've ever submitted, albeit signing contracts or things, it's done in the manner of which the roles are. And it doesn't matter if I'm second or last. It's the idea that our chair should be listed first and then the roles as they go, even if we do it alphabetical order. The signatures, it just didn't look professional. It didn't look, it didn't, the whole second page was basically just a photocopy of signatures, and I've never seen that. I've been involved with the school committee for 3 years now, and even the meetings that I attended, I never saw a letter that was submitted out in public that looked like the one.
I'd have to see a copy of the letter that you're referring to.
Sorry, how did you get those signatures for that?
I think it was like electronic, it was in, but it was a photocopy. Wasn't like electronic, it was a photocopy. It was
Just cut it and paste it.
cut and pasted out.
So, I mean, I don't know, we can have that discussion if policy wants to come up with, with a policy to determine how, when, where, and why we add signatures to documents. I mean,
And it doesn't even have to be policy. I don't mean to apologize. It can be part of our protocol of operating.
norms, I think.
Norms.
Right.
We didn't review
Yeah, I mean,
that
that's all.
so
before
as the way the letters were written, it was done purposefully because the letters were generated out of the finance and operations subcommittee. So I signed the letter as the author of the letter, and then Michelle's name was added next to mine, and then the rest of the committee was down below. I did that purposefully. I didn't do that unintentionally. I did that purposefully because the letter was authored by me, and it was just read through and approved by the chair.
But didn't you just say that it was through the chair? So if something is done through the chair, that's how it would be read. I looked that up. That's actually how that works.
But don't we teach kids not to plagiarize?
It's not a matter of
I don't
plagiarizing.
think Michelle would
It
want to
was, even
necessarily.
Tracy said in the training that, so if someone offers to write the letter, that's how it would be. I specifically asked that question at the training we had, and that's exactly what she said. And she said that letters should be signed by every member of the committee, because it shows that united front.
Which they were.
Technically, they were not.
They were not, wait, because you didn't,
No.
use the digital signature.
But it's not, you can't call it a digital signature. It is not a digital signature.
It's a photocopy of your signature.
It's a screenshot of another document. That's not the way the signatures would be. Which would have people's names and titles.
I would say, why don't we just shift this off to policy and move on?
So the other thing that I think needs to be addressed is the letters, is how we send letters out. Because we have upset the community, and unfortunately, this is a long time conversation coming because of the letter that went out from finance sub to the town, to members of the town of Wilbraham's FinCom. I'm only touching on it real quick because I think we just need to be mindful of who we are, what we represent, and keep personal feelings or opinions out of communications to community members, because we all, at the end of the day, need to work together. And we should work together, because we are the community that makes and runs these operations.
I don't disagree. And so the letter that was sent from Finance and Operations Subcommittee was not sent by Finance and Operations Subcommittee. It was sent by me as an individual. And I specifically did not put my heading as Chair of Finance and Operations for that reason, because I did not want this letter necessarily to go through the other 2 members of finance, but I felt very strongly that the information that was contained in that letter should be provided to the Finance Committee of Wilbraham so that they had a clear understanding of exactly what TWB was being used for and what the potential financial ramifications of closing that building.
And I'll tell you, I didn't have any disagreements with the history you provided. It was just that one last paragraph. And I made that very clear during our finance sub meetings.
Yep. And
That was the one thing that I think had it been removed, I don't think we've had any sort of problem at all. And I've now spoken my piece.
I agree that I think we should come up with some operating norms and discuss this and create, whether it's a policy or discuss it at the beginning of the year, especially with the new superintendent coming in as well. I think that's really important, but I think just as a committee, I think we should agree on what we would like to see happen moving forward and the way we'd like to communicate. And I think we also have to be very careful about communicating very clearly and what we say and what we put out there.
I think it's a great conversation for next year. I just want you to think of, I think it's a great policy or however you want to do it. So when you guys say to me, oh, make sure you send a thank you card, I gotta tell you, I'm signing your, we're putting your names there, right? Because you're saying
Oh, yeah.
all these cards. So we just need some clarity, right? So if you want me to be sending thank you cards with all your signatures on it for every scholarship we get and all the monies we get, I'd be about 2 years behind, right? Trying to get everyone together and signing off on it. So when you guys tell us those things, we move forward with your signatures on it. So it's just not generic.
So
as well,
it's
too.
my understanding that when, I remember when I got onto the school committee, Kate had me sign a piece of paper that
Sure.
was used.
Yep.
That's, if that was the signature that would have been used, that's what I
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
accepted
I
as
think,
an acceptable use of a signature. That was my only concern.
yeah, I think we're still transitioning and
Yep.
learning. And so I think we're just trying to get the letters out in a timely manner. And I think, you know, even some of those thank you cards probably have your signatures looking like that. So we need to get better at making sure those electronic, I know, but we're getting thank you cards out. I think the intent is there, but I think it's a
So,
great
yeah, when we have
conversation.
that conversation, obviously discussing the tape of correspondence, when there's a special circumstance, then, you know, we can address that
Okay.
and go from there.
That's all.
And yeah, and just as an aside, as every school committee member has the right to respond to any constituent. And I will tell you that the last paragraph of that letter was a very pointed paragraph. However, the spirit of it was deliberate. It was not meant to be insulting. It was meant to serve a point, and that was to say, you know, just exactly what you said. We're all supposed to be on the same team here. We're all supposed to be working for a common goal. Communicate clearly, which is exactly what we were trying to do in the letter, was to communicate very clearly as to where exactly money was being spent. The problem came in that the finance committee was basically using a collection of documents randomly assorted from requests from Aaron, but without any context behind it, and then making an assumption that this was money that was just being wasted.
I wasn't necessarily looking to get into the
That's okay.
details of that part. It was the idea that, you know, we generate letters, they get sent out. I mean, even during the meeting, all we did was, it was specific that it was clarified that the letter came from the subcommittee body, so. Happen, but it's either here or there because it's in the past. I just want to make sure we don't make those same mistakes in the future. You know what I mean? And I don't think we will.
I don't think it was a mistake. I think it's, again, up to interpretation, because if you have a letter that comes to policy, does that necessarily mean if it's a routine letter, is that a letter that necessarily has to elevate to full school and then back down to policy in order to be responded to? So again, figuring out where the walls and the floors and the ceilings are with subcommittee responsibility, I think that is a useful discussion, not so much as individual, not individual correspondence. I think you go blind on the paperwork
Yeah. No, I understand.
to write policies for that.
I think it's a great conversation you have.
Would you call it ceiling?
Ceiling, floors, and walls.
Okay, sorry. I don't know. Thank you.
It's late. All right, so the next is the, anything else on that? Anyone have any comments or additional questions? Okay, we will move on to the transfer process. So I have asked the district's legal counsel to render a legal opinion on the advisability of establishing a timeframe and schedule for future requests for transfers under the regional agreement to include deadlines for submission of applications, a description of supporting documents which would be expected, a target date for school committee action on such requests, and a procedure for allowing exceptions to the filing deadline under appropriate extenuating circumstances. And then as to related subjects such as transportation, standards for deciding requests under the operative language from the regional agreement and the impact of school choice on such applications, it would seem appropriate to allow for sufficient time for these types of subjects to be taken up in a global sense as part of the strategic plan development and related process.
Is he on? Is he coming?
He will not be joining us this evening.
Can you go back to the school choice one? Because I think
Yes.
he already rendered his opinion on the school choice. Can you
Yep.
word that again?
And the impact of school choice on such applications. So.
Can you read the whole?
Yep,
read the whole
as to
thing?
the other related subjects such as transportation, standards for deciding requests under the operative language from the regional agreement and the impact of school choice on such applications, it would seem appropriate to allow for sufficient time for these types of subjects to be taken up in a global sense as part of the strategic plan development and related process.
So I think in answer to your, I think Patrick is, he did render a decision how to do his school choice.
Yes.
But I think he's saying underneath this, if I'm not mistaken, that it's further conversation that's gonna be happening through the strategic plan. So if that did want to change, or we want to look at that, that would certainly be a conversation, be part of that.
However, moving from, I think what he's saying is that's part of the strategic plan, but we shouldn't be doing anything different than what we're doing right now with the current transfer requests that we have on the. in our
I'd
list.
ask for written legal opinion on that.
Okay,
That's what she said.
right. So that's what you wrote him, and we're just waiting for his response.
Correct.
Okay, so we're just kind of in a holding pattern for.
So I think the understanding right now is that Michelle and I are in agreement that we're going to move forward with the transfer process like we've done it for for this group right now, of this group of transfers right now, that we will continue to use the process that we have in the past. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yes, so moving forward is that
It was, I remember we were
we're looking
talking
for
about
legal opinion
I remember, yeah.
some of those other items moving forward.
when earlier on, when we talked about the potential of how we could look at that process. That's what she's talking about.
So
Not
that was an
changing right
executive,
now.
was that an executive session? That we talked about that?
We said it couldn't be a discussion, executive session. It needs
Yes.
to be a discussion,
Right.
open session.
That's why I was just saying, what you're referring to is it was an executive session.
No, I was talking about the one from last week that when we talked about, it. I mean, the last meeting we had. And we
So-
said that,
No, and I would say that in public session, I would say that, this is a very touchy subject. If we remember from when the lawsuit, well, I was on the school committee when the lawsuit began. Sean, you were too. One of the most contested points in the lawsuit was the allegation that the school district was quote unquote advertising the transfers. And so, that was a big point. So the idea of having transfer language and having a policy set up in order to address transfers could potentially be seen as being solicitous.
It wasn't for like a policy, but just more of, maybe establishing a timeframe.
Yeah.
When will the school committee be?
And I think,
there's
right,
some
but I think the
law-
process was, if
Guidelines.
by any stretch of formalizing the process, then it was being recognized and or promoted. And so that was sort of the thinking with regards to any changes. I mean, I don't know, I'd be interesting to hear his opinion, because there was an awful lot of discussion that went on behind closed doors with regards to the how we dealt with transfers, but that was done in executive session. I think the idea that we would entertain a change to the policy is certainly something that needs to be discussed in open session. But I would say that it would have to return to executive session in order to have the discussions on how it's going to be changed before it moves back into open session.
Which is why I reached out and requested. legal opinion.
Just clarify it for everybody. I'm just getting it straight in my own
Yeah,
brain, I
no
guess.
worries.
he was supposed to be here tonight, correct?
Yes,
So then I only have one other question.
we made a switch,
Because he was on the agenda, so I'm assuming he was supposed to be.
correct, and then there was a change
Remotely,
because,
remotely.
yeah. he was
Yeah, oh
gonna-
yeah, not
remotely.
physically, yeah.
But then based on having a written request, wanting
Because I
to
know-
advise.
Did you ever hear back from him on the request with regards to the assessment that you had? You had said you had posed a question to him. I'm just concerned that we don't always get answers.
I had-
Fashion.
I had followed up on that again today in our conversation, and he does not have an answer. So he was reaching out to the AG's office for additional guidance, and he's been pressing. And so right now they have a paralegal that's answering their questions, and he's just not satisfied with the responses that they're getting. So he's going to advise us based on his own ability and expertise and provide us an answer.
And I believe I had passed that off through Michelle.
I wasn't sure, but I remembered having a conversation with you. Oh, just curious. Thank you.
Patrick, did you want to say something?
Are you really trying to prolong this?
He looked like maybe he wanted to say.
He's
something.
not the best color man at the meetings for nothing, folks.
Okay, so future agenda items, is there anything? So I do have the budgetary impacts for minute chalk. Is there anything else?
The instructional coaches. There is still significant concern about the way that they're being deployed. And I don't believe that it's clear for our educators. So I would like to have a better understanding of that. The secondary piece of that is our substitute teacher pay and the number of openings that we have had such that principals have had to fill substitute teaching roles due to lack of substitutes. Thank you.
Just help me with that last one a little bit more.
I'd like to understand how frequent our principals are serving as substitute teachers because we don't have substitute teachers for their buildings.
Even as much as we increase the pay of our subs, and I think we're one of the highest ones around right now. It's just the availability. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere in all, not only just in the school district, but everywhere you go, there's not a place that doesn't say hiring, right? Everyone's.
But if you break it down, we pay roughly $15 and a little bit of change an hour. I would argue that's not enticing to too many people to come in and deal with middle school students, elementary students, high school. I don't know what age is the hardest one to teach as a substitute, because I'm sure they present unique challenges, but $15 and change, I'm not stunned that we struggle to get folks.
Did they get free lunch?
No, we're gonna get free lunch.
Well, then,
So if we could just look at that so that we have people doing what they should be doing, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Add that it's not just the pay. There are job slots that if they come in and to be a parent and then switch to a job slot, or be told this particular job, you will turn that.
And I know it's part of future conversation. I won't, and I say it over and over, we still gotta operate and run, right? So the difference is my buddy's still stuck in Florida, right? Because his flight's been canceled. It's just, they cancel, that's it. We don't have that luxury as an educational system, right? We still gotta make sure we're servicing our kids. We still gotta make sure we feed them. We gotta make sure they're still getting English or whatever. So literally is all of us trying to make sure that because we don't have the option of saying, okay, we're not gonna service you today, we're gonna close down. And so that's the hard part for us when we're looking to make sure that a day-to-day operation happens, because we don't have a choice of any other besides that.
So if we could just have a conversation
absolutely.
on how we cannot be as reactive and what we potentially could do, that would be helpful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Good.
Free lunch.
Wasn't there an issue too about who they reported to as well?
That's all part of the instructional coach conversation.
All right.
I think that would be a conversation.
Yeah, all right, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have the need for executive session pursuant to Master General Laws, C30A, Section 21A, 7 to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Mass General Law, C214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Student Records Law, Mass General Law, C71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Student Records Regulations, 603 CMR 23 et sequentia, and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 USC, Section 1232G, and 34 CFR, Part 99, regarding student transfer requests and move-ins.
Motion.
Second. Roll call vote, Bill.
Wait a minute. We need to just make sure we know who made the motion.
Patrick made the motion, Lisa seconded.
Okay. Sorry.
So we'll start again, roll call vote, Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheryl. Sean,
Aye.
Patrick.
Aye.
Lisa.
Aye.
Laura.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Just so you know, we will be reconvening to, regular session simply to adjourn. So we're now in executive session, 8:41, yeah.
Have a nice night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.